pleasure to have you all along this afternoon. We seem to have hit on an important topic this afternoon, the idea of restorative circles and how they can work for you in your school. The reason we seem to have hit on an important topic seems to come from our registrations. We've broken a bit of a record for our Real Schools webinar this afternoon. We've got 113 people who've registered today, which is incredibly exciting for us. And I guess one thing that is really affirming that this is a topic that people are looking for some assistance on. And I get a bit of a chuckle out of that sometimes, that whole idea that we need an understanding about restorative circles better, because it tells me that even in my own training around restorative practices, it comes from years and years of not only using this stuff practically, but in researching it, that it tells me that sometimes our training isn't providing all of the detail that people need to actually get started with restorative circles. And so that means that we need to get more specific about it. And so the intention behind the webinar today is very much to get specific about answering that the what, the how, the when, and for how long we should run restorative circles. I am amazed at how often I might run even some training, or I'll be working with a school who's been down the restorative path for quite a while, and a teacher will come up to me and ask a question like, so should I run a circle once a week? Or is my circle going too long? And it seems that we're not actually providing enough specific information in our restorative training. And so today is a first step to addressing that and making sure that if you're listening in today, that you're going to finish this webinar very much with the tools to be able to go out and get started with restorative circles, and if you're already down the track, then how you can actually get going and make your circles even more high impact than they've been in the past. All right, so probably time to get cracking on this one. So, oh boy, new computer, just making sure I can change slides on you guys. There we go, we've got a cute dog on the screen now. This is your captain speaking. So what I need to do first up, make sure that you've actually got all of the information to know how you can participate in the webinar today. Our absolute determination is that you get the chance to actually join in and to contribute, and to not only sit back and make this a passive experience where you might learn a couple of things, but perhaps we can learn from you too. So we want to know what it is that you're doing with restorative circles, and if you think there's a topic that you would like to either make comment or ask a question around as we're getting going here, then you're absolutely welcome to do so. So I want you to know how you can do that. You will see, even if you're a brand newly to go to webinar, you will see that you've got a control panel there that you can use. And there's a couple of ways that you can get involved. Number one is that you can put your hand up. So you'll see that there's a button near you, a button there for you that looks like a little hand, and you can put that hand up, and so that you can, that lets me know, just like any other classroom, that you have got something that you want to say, something that you want to ask, and I'll do everything I can to make sure that I get to you. So what I'll do, if you do put your hand up, is that I'll occasionally go and have a little bit of a look and just see if if there's something that I need to refer to. I won't do it straight away, so just occasionally I'll go and have a look at the list and just see if there's anybody with their hand up, and we'll defer to you. We'll unmute you, so we'll actually hear your beautiful voice, and you'll be able to ask a question or make your comment. And the other area that you can use is the question box. So you'll notice the question area allows you to be able to ask a very specific question. I'm going to keep an eye on that too. And a couple of times during the webinar I'll stop and have a look. And apart from that, what I'll make sure I do is that I get on there and have a look towards the end. So I'd like to welcome Shannon along from Canberra, who's jumped in with a hi Adam in the question box already. Great to hear from you, Shan. All right, so that's how you can get involved in the webinar today. Make sure you take advantage of those opportunities. We also want to acknowledge that when it comes to restorative circles, that you are getting a tiny sliver of the cake. So this is a small part, circles, of the whole cake, and the whole cake is the idea of how restorative practices can influence the way that you work, and that's a large piece of training. So there's some around that. While we are giving you a tiny little nibble today on a nice little piece of cake, which is restorative circles, which I always contend is one of the very best places to start with restorative practices, then I do want to make sure that you remember to stay in until the end of the webinar. I want to give you some information at the end today about how you can get the rest of the cake, and what the opportunities for you as an individual, and also for your school to be able to get the rest of the cake. When it comes to that, and thinking about what the best chances are for you to be able to get involved. We're also always really determined that when we run our webinars that we find out who you are, and we make sure that we tailor the presentation to the people that we've got here. So we're going to run 2 polls today, and the first one's about to come up right now. I want to know what sort of role you arrive in the room for our webinar today in. So I'm going to launch my poll here and let that one run, and all I want to know is which of the following applies to you. Are you here today as a primary teacher? Are you a middle years or a secondary teacher? You might be a special ed teacher. I've been really excited lately to find out that there's some special schools that are going down the restorative path, which is just which is incredibly exciting, I reckon, because the kids who often are most needing of empathy are the ones that need the most specific attention in that area, and otherwise the gap widens and widens. So I'm excited about that. I want to know if you're here as a school leader or a team leader in your school, and also if perhaps you're in a supplementary role or even a system role or something like that. So if you're in a school support type role, let us know in that by using this quick poll at the moment. And what I'm going to do just a moment now is close this poll, because we've got more than 80% of our people who voted now, which is fantastic. Thank you for being so responsive. I'm just going to share those results with you so you can see we've got more than half the people here today are primary trained or primary teachers, and so I'm going to keep that in mind as we go forward today. And but probably the most important thing for me to notice there is that I've got more than 70%, about 3/4 of the audience today are actually teachers in the classroom. So I'm going to make sure that I take a very strong focus on what's actually happening in the walls between the walls of your classroom, and keep that in mind as we move forward. I'm going to hide my results. Back to my presentation there now. Let's go on to the next part of our show. So I'm building my evidence case here. I have my evidence base for who you are and what's going on. And I guess that when we actually do tackle the idea of restorative practices, there's probably a reason around the circles that you decided to get involved today. And usually it's because there's some sort of risk, there's some sort of issue around getting going with restorative practices in your school. And if we just were to have a go, what's stopping us? What is it that's stopping us from really having a go or really developing our skill in restorative practices? So one more poll. I want to know why you came today. All right, what is your restorative risk? Okay, so is the risk that you have around working around restorative practices is that you've never run them before, you've heard some good things, but you don't really know how to get it going? Is the problem that you're facing a confidence issue? So is it something I've done some training on, I've read a bit, but I'm not really sure how to get it going? And one of the things I want to point out here for this poll too is that you can select more than one answer this time. Is it that your restorative circles are taking too long? So sometimes people tell me they haven't got room, I haven't got time to fit restorative circles into my program. And I want to know how I can do them in a time-effective kind of way. Is it that you feel that sometimes these restorative practices circles sound like a good idea, but they're not really changing anything? And it's not really actually working as a deterrent for the student behaviour issues that we might be confronting through restorative circles? And the last one might be, is it about the timing and the scheduling of your circles? Is it about when do I run them? How often do I run them? How much time do I allocate to them? And for what purpose should I be scheduling or using ad hoc restorative circles? So thank you again so much to everyone who's voted there. Just give me a really clear picture of what I need to focus on today. Again, I'm going to close the poll with more than 80% of people voting there and share the results. What I can see here is that we've got some newbies in the room. So we've got some people who have gone, okay, this restorative stuff sounds interesting, and I'm getting started with it. And then I'm also noticing that there's issues around that timing, and then of course there's that confidence thing. I know it's a funny thing, that confidence around restorative circles. We run some surveys that we do with our partner schools, and there are 10 questions that we ask teachers, and all of the questions are AITSL standards, reframed in terms of restorative practices, and all of them we reframe again in terms of teacher confidence and competence. And the one that always comes out the lowest for us is not about circles, but it's about being able to communicate this with parents. And so that's about getting really explicit about our language and really explicit about how they're serving our program. So I'm going to keep that in mind today as we move forward. Also, I'm going to hide those results again. Head back to our slides there, and we'll say goodbye to Captain Risky for a little while, because I reckon you guys have come along today to find out all about circles. All right, so before I actually get into what restorative practices circles are, there are 5 principles that I've come to believe incredibly strongly in when it comes to getting started with circles, and things that we need to have at top of mind. Sometimes we start the circle and then later on come up with a problem. What I want to suggest to you is that it'd be worthwhile for us to actually start with some principles, some reasons for us running circles, and saying, okay, with these well established in our consciousness, now we can get to work with actually conducting our circles. And the first principle here is that it must serve your learning program. And some of the problems that we encounter here when it doesn't serve our learning program come from, I guess, in our schools occasionally we might divide the whole idea of student engagement and well-being with the whole notion, from the whole notion of the academic program. And I think that that's an unproductive way for us to think about running restorative circles. The circles indeed must not stand alone. They're not about making people feel good. They're not about making people happy. They're there to build relationships so strong that you're able to leverage these for improved student learning. So they very much should connect to your learning. And one of the things that was really exciting for me as a principal was in one of my first schools that we implemented restorative practices was while we didn't have an incredibly specific change in the academic program, we did have a strong change in the way we went around our learning, our engagement and wellbeing work, and that was through restorative practices. And what do you know? Our student learning results went through the roof, and that was measurable in our own data, and certainly measurable in our NAPLAN data, which as a principal made me wildly excited and happy. So remember that your learning circles should not intrude upon the learning program. They should be designed to serve your learning program. They should make the learning time that you spend in your classroom more effective rather than feel like it's just being truncated by a circle. The second thing to remember in a circle, and this is an area that again some schools are getting wrong around running circles, is that engagement is absolutely everything. So what we're trying to do with our circles is maximise the opportunity for people to be actively engaged at all times. We want our students to spend as little time latent, as little time waiting as we possibly can muster, and I guess this is the reason that even this group of students that you can see here, secondary students, obviously this time around, the reason I like this picture is that if you actually sometimes when you're running a circle or if you've got a lesson going in your classroom, if you think about engagement in terms of a snapshot, in terms of taking a photo, if you step back and were to look at your classroom and ask yourself how many of the students right now are actively engaged in their learning. And we need to do the same thing with our circles. And if I look at this one here, this is a conversation, but every single one of the eight students in this picture is actively engaged. So they're either listening, they're thinking, or they're speaking. And that's what we're looking for with our circles. We're looking to make sure that all of our students are, as much as possible, listening or thinking or speaking. And the mistake we make sometimes is that we believe that our circles need to be, where everybody speaks and everybody delivers something of a mini monologue. And that's not the way the circles should be, because if we just start a circle and then go to the student on our right, what happens is that the student on our left, who knows that they're going to be the 26th person to speak, will switch completely off for a large period of time. And then once the student who speaks first on our right has their go, they then often tend to switch off while everybody else has their go. So lots of opportunities to break into little groups of 2 and 3, talk to a buddy on your left, then talk to a buddy on your right. I often love to do that, even with preps, is to, talk to the student on that you're next to, but my rule is that nobody drowns. So if you've got 5 students in a row and 2 and 2 and one's left out, we always grab that student out of the ocean and pull them into our boat and make a quick group of 3. So lots of topics, lots of change, lots of chunking of the time to ensure that engagement is at the top of our agenda every time we run a circle. Let's minimise that waiting time, and then we'll get a higher level of student participation in our circles. The next principle that I want you to consider is that less really is more when it comes to circles. So I'm a strong believer that unless there has been an incredibly serious incident for you to work on, that you should be minimising the time that you run your circles. You'll see when I get into what circles are in a moment, you'll see a poster that we've been using with our partners and member schools. And you'll see that in the bottom right of the corner is a very clear message that we're trying to keep our circles under 15 minutes. And so all the time we're trying to make sure that we keep our circles under 15 minutes, and you know, unless there's some sort of, you know, extenuating circumstance. And the problem with that sometimes is that people think, oh, a good circle then runs for 14 minutes. Not necessarily. I work with a fantastic teacher in a really tough school, who tells me that her check-in circles, which are a pivotal part of her learning program, run at the start of a week in particular, but often just to commence a lesson. She says that her record is 31 seconds. She has a group of Year 10 students, and you know, often more than 20 of them, and her record for checking in with them is 31 seconds. So we want to bring that down. Under 15 minutes means any period of time under 15 minutes, not right up to the edge of 15 minutes. Let's do them as quickly as we possibly can. Then I reckon we're doing our bit about your principle one also, about making sure that the circles are serving rather than intruding upon our learning program. The next thing about, the next principle that I want you to consider is all about position. Now, this is a photo that we actually took yesterday with our partners at Henderson College up in Mildura in the far northern tip of country Victoria, and I find it a really interesting photo, and I find it also slightly distressing because I really hadn't realised that the hair loss issue would become so acute for me. But this is a circle that we took with a prep class. And you can see here that if you think about the position of the kids and the position of myself in this circle is different to the way that a lot of schools run circles. And often when I walk into a classroom and see a teacher conducting a circle, what I see is a teacher, particularly with early childhood students, I see a teacher sitting on a chair, and then I see a group of students arranged in a circle around them. And what I know about this is that, and I actually believe that that was a valid way to run circles for a long time myself, but what I found was that when I do take a position of superiority in the circle by sitting higher, by sitting up on a chair, what happens is that the students tend to rely upon me to control their behaviour. So it means that their participation will be reliant on my supervision. What happens when I get to the same level as them is that they tend to mimic my behaviour rather than wait for me to control it. So here you can see a group of prep kids who are doing a lesson all around anger, and we're looking in this particular lesson at what anger feels like and looks like in our bodies. And I'm drawing a bit of a cartoon character of myself. They're lying on my belly on the floor, and the students are in the same position. And as you can see, if you do that whole thing from principle two, of looking at here, taking that snapshot of engagement, how many of the students here are either listening, speaking, or thinking? And we could actually say pretty confidently that all of them are very engaged. And as anybody who teaches early childhood knows, getting a high level of engagement from a prep class can be one ripping challenge, but some of that engagement has been fostered by the fact that I am at the same level as them. And I don't mind what you do. So for me, this is a circle that, you know, and I'm 6'5" and a large fella, and if I can get down on the floor, then most people can. I find the bigger challenge is getting up off the floor. But if I'm going to lie on the belly on the floor and draw, then the kids are going to do the same. If the kids are going to sit on the floor, then I'm going to sit on the floor. If the students are going to sit on a chair, then I'm going to sit on a chair. And if the student's going to stand and have a circle, then I'm going to stand. And if we decide that we're going to do that, whatever they're doing, I'm going to do, then I don't mind. If the old knees are telling me that I need to run a lot more standing circles or chair circles, then do it. And so the main important piece of importance here is that we're on a very even footing. Not only does it maximise their engagement, but it makes our circle complete. And a lot of people think that, you know, even the concept of circle sounds a little bit, I don't know, a little bit namby-pamby, and it's a big circle of trust or something like that. And it's not what it's about. The reason that a circle works is really just because of the absence of powerful positions. And so we need to be mindful of our own tendency to sometimes grab a powerful position. And the last principle I want you to think about is whether your circles need to be scheduled or whether they need to be flexible. And I get this question all the time from teachers: do I need to put it in my program, or do I just do it when it suits and when I get the opportunity? And the answer is both. We need to actually be the odd couple in one person. We need to decide that we're going to be Felix Unger and we're going to be Oscar Madison from time to time. And the best way to actually get to work on that is to understand that every circle has a purpose. And I have 5 types types of circles that I would like to advocate that you take on and have a little think about the purpose of these circles. And 2 of them are Unger circles and 2 of them are Madison circles. So the 5 circles types that I want you to consider today are check-in circles, check-out circles, preparation circles, really important ones, those ones, response circles, and also learning circles. And for me, in terms of determining what the circles are all about, the check-in and the check-out circles are the ones that you should schedule. They are our Felix Unger circles, okay? So my suggestion in getting going, if you're a primary teacher with your own class, or if you're a middle and secondary teacher with a home group or pastoral care group, my suggestion is that to get things going, start with at least 1 a week of each. All right, and we're going to have a look at what they are, what they're all about in just a moment too. And it's the 3 other circle types are our Oscar Madison types, our flexible ones that you can feel free to bring into the program as you need to. Okay, just whenever the opportunity presents itself or whenever the need presents itself, that you can use one of these circles and make sure that it does what you are looking for it to do. All right, so we're going to get going now with unpacking each of these. So let's have a little start here with our check-in circles, okay? So the whole idea of our check-in circles is that the focus is very strong on the present. There's often a bit of a future hint as well, so because when we run a check-in circle, it's most likely to be, for instance, at the start of a week, and we want to find out what's going on with our students. I know another really fabulous restorative practitioner in schools who tells me that she runs her restorative check-in circles because they're a social and emotional dipstick. So what she says is that she's got to find out what the oil levels are like, how the engine's running, before she can actually make teaching and learning happen. And wow, she has been able to really do an incredible job of being able to prove that her students learn and punch above their weight in their learning as a result of the check-in circles that she's factored into her work. So what we're looking for here is basically just to find out who our kids are and what's going on with them. And that can be incredibly valuable. I had a student who I taught who I didn't have a check-in mechanism going at the time. I hadn't learned all about this restorative thing yet, and I butted heads with him for most of the week until on a Thursday afternoon one of the other teachers in the school asked me if I was aware that his parents had split on the weekend, and I wasn't. And all the reason that I wasn't that I didn't care. It was that I just didn't have a mechanism for finding out. I didn't have a mechanism for checking in. And the truth is that effectively I wasted 4 days of his learning by not finding out what was going on with him in a social and emotional realm, and that meant that teaching him was basically impossible. Check-in circles can be, because when we're checking in, we're often trying to get everyone to respond. We don't want to have a monologue here. We don't want to have our attention-seeking students deciding to jump onto the stage. So I'm very keen on limiting the amount of words chosen. And often I'll ask students for a 2-word check-in. And what I'm looking for around that, I'll often prime the kids up for this by saying, just remember that when our students, unfortunately, have often got a reduced level of emotional intelligence, and they'll tell us either 2 negative words or 2 positive words. They'll either tell you that they're sad and angry, or they'll tell you that they're happy and excited. And real emotional intelligence is understanding that you can actually experience one positive and one negative emotion at the same time. So it is possible for you to feel tired and enthusiastic. And so I often ask for those 2 words, and I fly around the circle and get that done as quickly as I possibly can. You imagine if your students have just a little bit of practice at that, they'll move around the circle very, very quickly, which is great. And it means that the circle isn't intruding on the learning program. And rather than if I get something interesting, because you will also sometimes get students who will say the same thing every day. They'll tell you that they're, particularly sometimes our attention seekers will tell us that they perhaps are sad and angry every day. And your radar, your professional judgment will tell you quite well whether that's an attention-seeking ploy or whether there's actually something going on for them. But I look for something out of the blue. I look for something that is different to what the pattern is for a particular student. And on my average is that after a check-in circle, that what happens for me is it usually leads to 2 of what we call in the restorative world affective statements. Affective interactions. So 2 opportunities, whereas the students might be getting their maths book out after the check-in circle, I will wander by and say, hey, what was that all about? You said there that you're feeling tired and annoyed. And then it might be that something's happened at home, or they didn't get much sleep, or there's a crying baby in the house, or they had an argument with mum that morning. morning. But at least I know now. And I can make that adjustment and say, hey, how about I just check in on your lunchtime? Is there anything I can do to give you a hand and get you back on the job? And it might just be that they just want you to know, and that that's enough for them to be able to switch the emotional components of their brain off, and to be able to switch the learning and thinking components of their brain on. And as I said at the bottom there, in terms of frequency, I want to suggest strongly to you that about once a week is a great place to start. Now, if you can bring the time of that down, you might say, wow, this is a piece of cake. I can actually do this far more often. And I know several teachers who do a great job with check-in circles of just saying the kids don't come into the room until we check in. So we might actually just stand outside if we get a sunny morning, stand in a circle, guys, do the check-in, fantastic, in we go, grab your books out, let's get to work, let's make this happen today. All right, so that's a check-in circle, a little bit mainly about the present, and then sometimes it's that a little hint of the future, and we might be talking about, you know, what we want to have happen during the day and what we're looking forward to that week, can often creep into our check-in circles, and that's where we get that little future element to them. All right, let's have a little chat about check-out circles. These are some of my very favourite circles. You can see here that as opposed to a check-in circle, the focus for a check-out circle is about the past. So what we're doing through a check-out circle is scheduling these. Again, I suggest to you about once a week as a starting point. But the focus is about looking backwards rather than forwards. So as a result, I used to run my check-out circles on a Friday afternoon, or just at the last opportunity for me to have my students with me. So even if it's a Friday morning, that's no big deal. And we use this opportunity to reflect back on what they've been learning, what they've been doing, but also how they've been performing, what their effort levels have been, what their socialisation has been like, how far they've stretched themselves, what sort of school values they've been living out during the week, what sort of affect or what sort of feelings they've been generating for themselves and also for other people in the classroom or in the school. So we can start with checkout circles. The great way to go about checkout circles is to start ridiculously simple, and you might ask the students a very, very basic and fundamental question like, you know, what did you enjoy the most this week? And I always remember having a student in my class who was my sporty inclined year 6 lad, who for about the first term of me asking about their favourite thing that week, would tell me things like either lunch or sport. And it was rather infuriating for me. And so what I decided to do was to actually increase the sophistication of the questions that I was asking. And I moved on from what was your favourite thing this week and started to ask them questions about, for instance, like the words we've got there about reflecting on performance. So I would ask them, what was the thing that you learned the most quickly this week? And I would make them think a little bit about what they've been doing. And I'd ask them, when was it that you tried the hardest this week? When were you the most resilient this week? What was the most difficult task that you tackled with a positive attitude this week? What was the time that you made someone else in the classroom feel great this week? And just challenge them to move forwards with that. And by the end of the year, even with an upper primary age group, I was certainly able to ask them really highly reflective questions about, things like, who was it that you didn't work well enough with this week? And that was often the focus then of a check-in circle for the next week, or a preparation circle. And I could even ask them things that would provide me feedback about my own teaching. So I could actually ask them, what was great about my teaching this week, and get what a great way of being able to get the ego stroked. And then I unfortunately got a little bit cocky after that and decided to ask what was the worst teaching that I did this week. And a lovely lad in my class decided to let me know that when we did spelling on the Wednesday morning, that I did that while I had done a rather good job for most of the week, I was doing some OUGH words, and he said that the class didn't know what I was talking about, but I kept going anyway. And I thought that was rather harsh until I looked around the circle and saw 25 other heads nodding politely at me with a wry grin on their faces, and I realised that I actually had done that. And I'm not the world's most natural teacher of spelling, and what I had done was rush over it in my attempt to make sure that the lesson went well, but I wasn't thinking about what the students were taking on. And when I got over my mild embarrassment at that, it was actually some of the really most meaningful feedback that as an educator you can get. And so taking the opportunity to scaffold forward in our checkout circles and really challenge the kids with more sophisticated questions is what I'd like to encourage you to think about there. Okay, so let's check out circles. And there are our two Felix Unger type circles that I want you to look to schedule in your program. And the truth is that if we don't schedule for them, if we don't actually look at our timetables and say, no, this is the 15 minutes that I'm going to allocate to that, then the truth is it probably won't happen. So we do need to get very explicit about making sure that those two circles are a feature of our program that doesn't slide off the table, doesn't fall off the agenda when things get busy, or when school concert comes along, or when NAPLAN testing comes along. We need to make sure that these are a feature of our program that are a non-negotiable if we're going to say that we're a restorative school. All right, let's get on to our let's move on to our Oscar Madison circle. So I say that they're Oscar Madison because we're just going to use them when we can. So you'll have weeks when you'll use quite a few of these, and you'll have weeks where you may not even use one. But you're going to look for the opportunities to use one, and you're going to look to choose the right one for the right opportunity. And the first one I want you to have a look at there is the whole idea of a preparation circle. So I refer to preparation circles whenever there's something coming up that's a little different. It might be that it's just an assignment that that the kids are going to have to take on. It might be that there's a change in the program. So, for instance, the biggest change for primary educators is often that your absence. So, if I can put to you very strongly that having a preparation circle, if you know that you're going to be away the next day, preparing the kids for that change through a preparation circle on the afternoon before is a very wise thing to do. As kids know, surprises engage all sorts of emotions for them, some positive and some negative, and when they do get emotional, they're less likely to choose a well-worn strategy from the thinking parts of their brain. They're great for special events, and they're also great for being able to establish new standards. So if there's something that if there's something that has been a problem for your class, and you are enforcing, for instance, a new expectation around that, or a new rule, or even the imposition of a penalty for failing to reach a new standard, preparing them for that rather than surprising them with that penalty can be a really beneficial thing to do. So I used to use preparation circles for one, when I knew that I was going to be away; two, if I knew that we were going on an excursion. I certainly ran preparation circles if I was going to go on a camp. I would run a preparation circle if I was going to have parents in the classroom or something like that the next day, and I would run a preparation circle if we had sports day, and make sure that it was really clear what we were preparing for and the way that it was going to go. Thought I might at this point just give you a bit of an example about the way that a preparation circle can work for you. I often contend that what we do when we prepare students for a change in the program or a special event is that we focus very hard and very quickly on the behaviours, and often we do it negatively. So one of our defaults is that we'll tell the kids, okay guys, we're going on an excursion tomorrow. The three things you need to remember are that you don't yell out, you don't run around the concrete, and there's no swearing. And unfortunately, we've primed them three negative ways for the very kinds of behaviour that we wish not to see. I want to suggest to you that with your preparation circles, that you actually stop for a moment and get back before the behaviours. Restorative practices is very much about feelings. So if you would just say to the students, what is it that we want to feel on our excursion tomorrow to the pool? And so often I'll come up with feelings like we want to feel excited, we want to feel included, and then there's usually a goody two-shoes in the class that'll make sure that they say what you want them to hear, and or they'll say what you want to hear, and they'll say that we need to be safe while we're at the pool. And we say, okay, fantastic. I think that it's a really an appropriate goal for us to say that we want to feel excited and included, and we want to feel safe. So what are the behaviours then that we would need to list that would make us feel excited, included, and safe? And you'll find the students will start to say things like, what we need to do tomorrow is we need to bring a positive attitude. If we're going to feel excited, we've got to try something new. You can't just do what you've always done and sit on your towel, or jump in from the side when you should be jumping off the 3-metre board or something like that. You've got to try something new if you're going to get excited. They might tell you that when it comes to inclusion, we've got to take turns and not barge in front of other people and make sure everybody gets there to go with the pool equipment. They might say we've got to look out for others. We don't go running past and pushing past people and not giving other people their fair go. And when it comes to safety, they'll tell us things like we're going to walk around the pool edge and we're going to follow the instructions that we get from our teacher. And what we've got there, I will often, when I'm running a preparation circle for an excursion like that, I'll often, put that up on the whiteboard. I might save that, or I might take a photo of it, or I might get some recording of it in some way to ensure that we've got this in place here, and it's something that we can refer to later on. But what we've been able to do here is make it very clear that these are the behaviours that we wish to see, and they're all very positive. And the other thing is that if we get those behaviours right, we've provided motivation, because we will feel excited, included, and safe throughout our excursion if we get that right. And that leads us on to the whole idea of next having a little think about response circles. Now, response could be about something that has been unforeseen that we wish to respond to. And unfortunately, sometimes this means we're ready and we're going to use our response circles to respond to something that has happened that is really sad. And that could be that there might be a death in the family of one of your students, or even for the little ones that you might have, that might be about the loss of a pet or something like that. And so what we want to do is to be able to say that we've got a way of being able to sit down and say, hey, this has happened. It's nobody's fault. There's no blame attached to this, but we want to respond nonetheless, and we want to do something about it. It can also be used to respond when there is fault, when there has been harm done by the behaviour of the students in your care. And that might be that they've had a terrible PE lesson, and they've come back to you, and you've seen a PE teacher completely at the end of their rope, and you've realised that, they've let me down here. And the truth is, they need to know that they've let you down. So having a response circle gives us the forum to be able to deal with that. And the positive part about a response circle is that you can actually deal with really exciting things as well. So it might be a birthday, or it might be a special achievement that a student has achieved on the weekend. We ran a response circle for some kids who decided to take on the 40-hour famine and did a terrific job with it. And we wanted to respond to that and congratulate them on the work that they did and the funds that they raised. So it gave us a chance to sit down with a real focus to respond to something that has happened. And if you ever think even about our swimming excursion, we had a preparation circle, and if I actually have recorded that, then what I can do is say, okay, I can bring that back up on my smart board, or I could bring out the printout of this or the photo of it and say, okay guys, remember this, we prepared on Tuesday for our swimming excursion. On Wednesday we went on the swimming excursion. What I would like us to do is to respond to that. And the way that I would like you to respond is to have a little think about, out of 10, how would you rate the performance of the class against these behaviours that were apparently going to allow us to feel excited and included and safe while we were on our swimming excursion? And you can ask the students here, maximising engagement, turn to the person next to you, have a little bit of a chat. What's the number you would give? Bring another pair together. You've got a group of 4 kids now agreeing on a number. We could share that back as a group and come up with a bit of an average. And so you might end up with a score of that bringing a positive attitude. You might say a 7, which again, we could record this. And the next time we've got an excursion, we could have a chat about how that 7 could become an 8. And so we get a cycle going here between our preparation circles and our response circles, which very much gives us the opportunity to make that an ongoing learning experience through that feedback loop that kids are getting, which is always about preparation, response, preparation, response. And so you can see here there about how they grow upon each other. They don't stand in isolation, and we're looking for continual improvement, not only in obviously the academic area, but certainly in terms of the way that they socialise and interact with each other. The last type of circle that I'd like to have a chat with you about today is our learning circles. So these can be used to introduce either a new piece of content, or they could be used to introduce any sort of academic material as well. So I often use a learning circle to introduce, if I'm going to do a new unit of work, and that could be, let's say it's going to be a unit of work on ancient Egypt. And we might just have 3 key questions to kick off the unit of work, where we might say, okay, well, tell me what you already know about ancient Egypt. Tell me what it is that you would like to know. And then we might just, roll the ball across the circle for 3 or 4 students to tell us what they would like to know. And then they might be able to tell us how it is that you would like to learn more about ancient Egypt. And so what is the type of learning activity that we'd like to do here? So we get to do it that way. I know a really fabulous PE teacher teacher who introduces every one of his lessons is introduced with a learning circle, where he sits the students down and he says that he's able to get his learning circles done in 3 minutes. So he's only got 50 minutes with every class, but he allocates 3 to a learning circle. And he says what he does is, okay guys, today the topic is, for instance, we're going to be learning about cricket. Tell me what you already know about cricket. And he rolls a ball across. It goes to 2 or 3 students and then back to him. He says the skill that we're going to work on today is bowling, and he rolls it to another 3 students who tell him what they know about bowling and what you need to do to be able to be a good bowler. And then he says sometimes when we're learning about bowling, it can get a bit dangerous because there are cricket balls and people learning how to bowl. What are the ways that we're going to stay safe while we do this today? And he gets agreements about not only the content of the lesson, but the process of the lesson, and he gets agreement on making sure that the lesson runs in a really safe and inclusive way. And he says it can be done in 3 minutes, and I think that's an incredible and a cracking achievement. I want to just show you, I guess this is again up at Henderson College in Mildura, a learning circle that we ran yesterday. And this is a group of Year 5 and 6 students who we introduced. The topic the piece of content that we wanted them to learn about was the restorative operating domains. If you've done any restorative work before, you'd be aware of what they are. It's about how we balance firm and fair, and we do it by thinking about whether we're doing things as a teacher in terms of whether we're working by doing things to the students, whether we're not doing much at all, whether we're doing things for the students, or whether we're actually working with the students. And that's the quadrant of that model, balancing firm and fair, that we're trying to aim for. And we ran this circle with these kids to introduce that to with for not concept, and getting them to describe themselves in terms of their friendships. And one of the ways that we did run this learning circle, this circle took about 15 minutes, so we got right up to the limit here, but we were a bit sneaky and a bit clever about it. You can see that each student there has a piece of paper. This is a progressive learning circle, which means that what happens here is that each student picks up their piece of paper, they look at the paper and they say, I love you, but I have to let you go, and they pass it to the left. And then they draw one line down the middle of the piece of paper and they say, I love you now, but I have to let you go, and they pass it to the left. And they gradually build the operating domains. It's not their piece of paper, but then what happens here by making it a bit of a progressive learning circle like that is that it engages, in particular, the boys, who as John Joseph will tell us, is that for a lot of our boys, we have our brains below our elbows. And so keeping the hands busy is really important if we want the boys to stay engaged throughout an entire 15-minute circle. And again, I ask you to have a little bit of consideration here. This is a 30-second gap here where I ask the students very explicitly for 30 seconds to listen while I describe the type of friend who sits in the 2 box. And if I were to ask you of these students, what percentage you think is actively engaged, whether they're thinking, whether they're listening, or whether they're speaking, I think it's pretty clear that there's a high level of engagement going on here. Perhaps the lad in front of the whiteboard's not quite paying full attention, but most of the other students are very engaged in what we're doing. And that's an exciting thing. It means that over a long period of time we've been able to keep them on the job, which is really great. So that's an example of a learning circle there for you. So it brings us back to this whole concept now of the idea that now you know the 5 different types of circle that you can deploy. That is just to remember that this sounds really big sometimes, but the truth is that we want to make sure that we keep all our circles, barring extenuating circumstances, we want to keep them down to 15 minutes, keep them under 15 minutes, and well under 15 minutes if you possibly can. And the other thing that we've said there that I think is a really important message for our circles is that it's called restorative practice for a reason. It's a practice. The first one you run will feel like you're writing with your non-preferred hand. You'll feel very clunky and awkward, and the great news is that it's the most clunky and awkward that you'll feel. So for those large percentage of people who said that they haven't run circles before, the first time you do it, be prepared for it to feel weird and odd and perhaps bad, and it's okay. It's okay. The way that you get better is to just keep doing them. Just stick at it. It's a little like riding a bike, I suppose, that you actually can't get better at riding a bike by reading the manual. You get better by falling off, getting back on and giving it another go and riding a little bit further and a little bit more efficiently the next time around. So give it a go. You can't break your students with restorative practices circles, and all you'll do is get better and better at it, and you'll provide a really rich environment for them for them to find out who they are and what it is they're doing. I said at the start that today was about a sliver, and it is. But I did say that I also wanted to give you the opportunity to be able to get the whole cake. And so one of the ways that we're doing that is that we're going to run some training for restorative practices for teachers. If you would like to know where the whole circle thing fits and where it fits in terms of the language that we need to do to be really effective in our work, and how you can actually use conferencing, where the whole theory of shame fits into all this, how you can even run small impromptu conferences for the frightening Year 6 girls that really give us the heebie-jeebies towards this time of the year. We're going to run some training for teachers around restorative practices. It's a very much a cross-phase piece of training here, which is going to run across primary and secondary phases. And for your attention today, we actually want to pay you for coming along today. So if you are attending the webinar today, then we're going to give you a $50 discount on this training. So the workshop is $295. It's on the 22nd of October in the CBD in Melbourne. And if you would like to have you or somebody from your school enrolled in this training at a $50 discount, then all you need to do is go to the question box now and write the words October PL. And if you put that in there, we're going to send you the flyer. And if you return that to us, we're not going to invoice you for the $295. We're going to invoice you for $245, and hopefully make your principal very happy about the discount that you've been able to establish for your school. We ran this training earlier in the year, and it was just a truly fantastic day. It sold out incredibly quickly. So this time we've been able to secure a larger room to be able to run the training. But if you're interested in finding out what the experience was like for the people who were there last time, can I suggest really strongly, you'll see there's a YouTube link there, and you can go to that YouTube link, or even if you just look up our YouTube channel and search for the video that way, you can see a bit of a vox pop. So we had some of the participants that were at the training last time on the way out tell us a little bit about what the training was like for them. And if you go to that link there, you'll be able to see what they had to say, because while I really want you to come along and be a part of it, you probably shouldn't take my word for the effectiveness of it. So feel absolutely free to go to that YouTube link and come along on the day, and you get the whole cake around restorative practices, so you know exactly where your circles fit in the way that we're going about implementing a really relational culture around your school. If you came along today thinking that, wow, that whole cake thing seems enormous, and how do I get that into my school? The way that we do it at Real Schools is through a partnership. So what we do is we have schools selecting an improvement theme, and for them, a lot of those improvement themes are things like restorative practices. And in fact, I'm just really proud and excited that we have about 60% of our schools now in partnership, and we've got 45 schools around Australia in long-term Real Schools partnerships. About 50 to 60% of them have restorative practices partnerships or restorative practices intended partnerships. It's a big deal. It's a really big change to make, and it takes effort. And our partnerships are designed around not just coming and training in the school, but working in the classroom, such as with the Henderson College pictures that you've seen today. And so we work in the classroom with you. We train your parents, which is what we did last night in Mildura. We mentor your leaders and help you build the implementation plan. And we use a template that I've certainly used myself as a principal. We coach your teachers so that they actually can get that help after they can get the help with the barriers that come up that are sometimes presented by early childhood students, or perhaps early teenage girls, which I've probably declared now as being my kryptonite and my challenge in getting really explicit about how I work with them. And then we also make sure that you get stacks of resources along the way, unlimited phone and email contact for the things that come up. And if that sounds like something that appeals to you, then what I want you to do also is go to that question box. And if you feel like your school might be ready to get really serious about this restorative thing, then just put the word partner in that chat box. Don't worry, putting the word partner in there won't generate an invoice for your school. What it means is that I'm going to reach out to you, and I'm going to arrange an opportunity for us to have a conversation, either on the phone or over a coffee, and to determine what the best fit is between your school and for Real Schools also. So if that appeals to you, make sure that you just write the word partner in there. We'll find a way of getting back in touch with you after today. And indeed, in terms of getting back in touch with you after today, I really want to encourage you to just have a think about the fact that you're going to get an email from us in just a few days, and the email will include a YouTube link to the recording of the webinar today. And this isn't something that we would like to, make it very difficult for you to be able to, and there's no secrets here. There's no secret Real Schools business. We want you to feel that you can show that to your colleagues and to be able to, get this information out there. So use that YouTube link. Feel free to play it with your professional learning teams or indeed with your staff, and we'll make sure that you get the full benefit of the time that you put aside today, because I really want to respect that. It's really important to me that you know that I really very strongly value the time, the hour that you've put aside today to learn a little bit more about restorative practices and how circles can serve you. Don't forget to go and have a good gawk around the website. There's lots of information there about the ways that you can get in touch with us. We have not only our partnerships, but we have the Teacher Fast Track program, which is a 12-month online commitment to helping you with practice. And so if you go and click on there, you can actually just register straight away from there, and we'll take care of the whole getting you started later on. 12 months of support there. You can get some coaching for your leadership team there. You can get membership happening for your school. So if any of that appeals to you, have a good look and just feel free to send us an email at info@realschools.com.au, and we'll make sure that you get the information you need to move forward. There's those contact details again. You can even give us a bell on our 1300 number there as well if getting a conversation together happening is really what you're looking for too. So the last thing I want to do before I actually just open the floor and make sure that I think this is actually possibly one of the first times that I've been able to make sure that I finish in time to give people the chance to ask a couple of questions. So I'm very proud of that. But what I always want to do is to make sure that you're aware of our next webinar. And our next one is generated out of conversations that I've had with school leaders all around Australia lately. And what we're trying to do is to get really clear about what are the key things that need to be done to lead whole school student behaviour improvement. Not just with our pointy end kids, not just for our kids who might get labelled the good kids from time to time, not just with the little themes that bob up with our angry boys or our nasty girls or our immature early childhood kids or anything like that. What does it take to get the whole school up and running and moving forward in terms of student behaviour? How can we end that whole cycle that we have sometimes happening in our schools of teachers feeling that they need to handball upwards to get somewhere in terms of behaviour? And how can we actually flip that and get a bottom-up responsibility revolution happening? So if that appeals to you, we're going to send you the email link to that in our follow-up email to you, and make sure that you jump on board for that one and get your school leaders involved in that one too. So now we do have a little bit of time here for a question, so I'm just going to check my questions. I know there's been some people putting things in there. Okay, Natasha's letting me know and Emma's letting me know the Thursday is the 17th, not the 19th. Always the way I read the calendar wrong. Thank you so much, guys. We're going to make sure that we correct that immediately, and that you actually get the chance to register on the right day. It is going to be the Thursday afternoon, so I apologise for that. So remember that Thursday the 17th, not the 19th. Molly Rose, I've got a question from Molly here that asks us, when you're in a team teaching room, is it better to split into your two grades or work as a whole group? I'm struggling with the timing of this and the length of the circles. Molly, that's an absolutely important and a valid question. My suggestion to you when you're working in a co-teaching or a team teaching role is that, yes, don't, unless there is a really serious circumstance, don't run a circle for 50 students. The great part, though, of working in a co-teaching environment is that when you do split them in a variety of different ways. So, for instance, Monday might be a your class, my class. Tuesday, when we do a quick check-in circle, might be that one teacher does the boys and one teacher does the girls. Thursday might be yellow and green house in one area, red and blue house in another area. Friday's check-out circle might be I'll take the year 5s, you take the year 6s. So keep making sure that you make the process of circle more important than who they're actually with, and use every possible opportunity that you can to split them up. But probably, Molly Rose, the most important thing is to make sure that engagement is key whenever you're running those circles. So my advice would be don't run circles for 50 kids, split them up, and split them up in a variety of different ways, but always look for ways to get their engagement happening by turn to a buddy, talk about this. Every kid, we want them listening, or we want them thinking, or we want them speaking while they're actively involved in a circle. So I hope that answers that question. Rosalie, what do you do with kids who always pass during circle time? And this is where sometimes I can be a little controversial, I guess. I'm not a particular fan of the tribe's approach and the insistence that there is a right to pass, because I do believe that while certain kids develop habits of passing and certain kids develop habits of not passing, the gap widens. So I think that it's important to address that, and we're looking to always up the expectation on students to participate. One of the ways that I up that expectation is through silence. So as teachers, we are notoriously terrible with silence, and so what we do often is say, how are you feeling today? I pass. And they're like, okay, and we go to the next student because we don't like the silence. I often will say to a student, if I really do firmly believe that they can answer the question of 2 words, how are you feeling today? If I believe that they're well capable of answering that question and they say pass, I'll go, hang on just a moment, I'll just give you a moment to think about it. And I'll more than happily sit silently. I'll often count to 7 in my head. 7 seems to be a good number for students feeling that they might just think of something to stop me from staring at them in silence. So I look to up the expectation. We've got a high level of support going on through a circle, and restorative practices is about marrying a high level of support with a high level of expectation. So I up the expectation by that. And the other thing that I often do is to prime my classes for the fact that I'm not fond of passing. I really want you in. I really want your contribution. I really want to know what you think. I really want to know what you feel. And I really want to know what you're deciding. And so I let them know in advance that that passing is not my favourite thing to do. And one of the things that you can do also is to be able to, you can have a pass. One of the things I have tried is a pass card. So it might be that once a term you get a pass card. And you can use that if you're feeling a bit quieter, you've got a sore throat. I'm going to try and keep rattling through. We've got some fabulous questions here. What should the teacher's response be? This is a question from Katie. What should the teacher's response be to each child's contribution to the circle? Is it more important just to acknowledge and validate than to say too much? I absolutely think you're right there, Katie. What we need to do is to move on quickly in the circle. So it's usually for me just a quick thanks and move on. And often I won't even provide that if the response is being provided is a silly one. So I'll just go, yep, and move to the next student. And thank them if they give a more serious response. So a quick thank you and move on is important. And like I said earlier, my average would be 2 effective interactions. So 2 quick one-on-ones that might come if a couple of students have said something interesting afterwards. I don't believe that the appropriate forum for if a student comes along and all of a suddenly they're sad and angry is to explore that publicly. I think that the best avenue is to just have a quiet chat afterwards. Say, hey, how can I help you with that? What was that all about? And make the support a little bit more private, particularly if it's a negative emotion thing that's come quite out of the blue. Carly has a secondary school question. How is this used in secondary schools? Examples. Carly, I've used all 5 types of circle in my work with secondary schools. In particular, 2 circles that I think work really, really well are the check-ins, and so finding it because they, with a high level of emotional intelligence, can move quite quickly in that regard. They're also quite happy for you to have the quick one-on-one with them afterwards if they've said something interesting. So they can really, once they get really good at it, and once schools can take it on collectively and the students know that it'll happen regularly for them, they move quite quickly through that. It does really help the learning program. And the other thing is around those the concept of the learning circles, and just saying, okay guys, let's just get on an even footing here, rather than have students assume typical classroom behaviours that might not always be so positive by sitting in their desks or something like that. Then I'll often grab a secondary group of kids and outside the room, guys, I want you to just stand up together today. I want to let you know, first of all, this is the content we're going to talk about today. Are there 4 people who could tell me what they already know about that and what they think is important? And also, guys, I have an expectation about the way we'll conduct ourselves today. Can 4 people tell me how they can live up to the idea of personal best today? And get some ideas, rightio guys, now into the classroom. And we change the entry, we change the first contact as they come in. So it can be dealt with in terms of academia, and it can also be used to make sure that we're dealing with the social and emotional work that we need to do in high schools, particularly in high schools, I guess, where you've got a far more fragmented program, where you've got kids who have several teachers and several learning periods throughout the day, and the separation of that. If we can make sure that our circles are super quick and very to the point in terms of both what the content will be and how the student behaviour will be around the way that they engage. Deborah, how do you change school expectations from a 1 hour session to 15-minute session. It's got to be explicit. So we've got to make it really clear that this is the way we do circles. And, you know, a 1 hour circle for me would be for if there was a really serious incident in the school, because, you know, that's a whole bunch of learning time taken up. And my question about a 1 hour circle would be, what percentage of engagement are we getting from those students the longer that we keep them there? So I would suggest to you that at the start of a circle, we have engagement, we would aim at engagement around maybe 70%. After the first minute or so, it actually goes up, and we've got a better chance once we've introduced the circle to get a high level of engagement. But then after about 5 to 10 minutes, what happens is it drops away, and it continues to drop away. And I would ask us to think about, after 55 minutes in a circle, what the level of engagement would be. And even for me, Deborah, what I would do is think about, you know, taking some photos of circles and how students are engaging after 5 minutes compared to how they're engaging after 50 minutes. And seeing if we can move forward from there. One other thing too, when you're doing a response circle, which might be to a social problem, we also want to keep that low. And so one of the things that I might do is to, you know, make it very clear that we're going to spend 3 minutes on the past, 3 minutes on the present, 3 minutes on the future, and move the conversation forward. Because particularly when you're dealing with kids, and particularly when you're dealing with girls around that year 5 to year 9 age group, the conversations can end up very long and very past anchored, which is not what we're looking for from a restorative circle. All right, I'm noticing that we have answered some really fantastic questions there, and that the time is just ticking over an hour. So we're going to have people who are who need to head off. So thank you so much. If I didn't get to you today, I can actually see a couple of hands up there, but that I haven't got to today. If I didn't get to you, just write your question down, write it down, and just send it to info@realschools.com.au, and I'll make sure that you get a response to that. Thank you so much to all of the people that have put something in the question box today, whether it was about partnership or whether it was about the PL that's coming up in October. We're going to get back to all of you after today. Have an awesome week, guys. I'll let you go there, and we'll see you at the next webinar, which will be the 17th of September, not the 19th. Thanks, guys. Talk to you soon. Bye for now.